The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. A human technician had opened the sealed Tower of Ascendancy using nothing but a paperclip. Some species celebrated. Others were embarrassed. A few refused to believe it was true. Deho found himself suddenly famous, and he hated every moment of it. Another interview request, Taiyang said, scrolling through messages. This one from the Galactic News Network. They want to do a documentary. Tell them no, Deho said. He was sitting in a small room provided by the station, trying to enjoy a quiet meal. It wasn't working. People kept finding him. You've already said no to 17 interview requests. Then this will be 18. Taiyang laughed. You're the most reluctant celebrity I've ever seen. The door chimed. Before Deho could say anything, it opened. A human woman in a military uniform entered. She was older, maybe 50, with sharp eyes and an air of authority. Captain Mirai, she said, introducing herself. I command the exploration vessel Bright Horizon. May I have a moment? Of course, Deho said, gesturing to a chair. Captain Mirai sat down. I wanted to meet the man who proved that humans belong in the galactic community. What you did was more than fix an elevator. You showed every species out here that human ingenuity matters. I just did my job, Deho said. Exactly, and that's what makes it powerful. Mirai leaned forward. Earth's government is interested in establishing a new division focused on practical problem-solving for xenoarchaeological sites. They want you to lead it. Deho blinked. Lead it? I'm just a technician. You're the technician who did what no one else could. That means something. You'd have resources, a team, access to sites across the galaxy. Think of all the ancient technology you could help unlock. It was an incredible offer. Life-changing. But Deho thought about what it would mean. Paperwork, management, politics. Not fixing things with his own hands. Thank you, he said carefully, but I need to think about it. Mirai nodded. Take your time. The offer stands. She left, and Deho sat quietly, processing what had just happened. Later that day, Velthar invited Deho to witness the first expedition into the Tower of Ascendancy. Dozens of scientists and researchers gathered at the elevator, excited and nervous. This moment has been 200 years in the making, Velthar said. My people have sought the knowledge in these archives for generations. Today, thanks to you, we finally have access. Jiwan led the first group into the elevator. Deho joined them, along with Velthar, Kormath, and several other researchers. Even Thexnor came, though he stood in the corner, clicking quietly. Jiwan pressed the button for level 10. The elevator rose smoothly, silently. Through the transparent walls, they could see the inside of the tower. Vast chambers filled with shelves. Storage units and display cases, all perfectly preserved. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened onto a massive library. The archives stretched as far as they could see, filled with data crystals, books, and devices Deho didn't recognize. Incredible, Jiwan whispered. She moved to the nearest display, examining the labels. This section is about medicine. The next one is engineering. They organized everything by subject. Over the following hours, teams explored different levels. Each floor contained archives on different topics. Agriculture, art, philosophy, mathematics, energy production. The precursors had left behind their entire civilization's knowledge, organized and waiting. On level 50, the highest floor, they found something special. A small room with a single pedestal. On the pedestal sat a crystal that began to glow when Jiwan approached. It's a message, she said, her voice shaking with excitement. A message from the precursors. The crystal projected images and text into the air. Jiwan worked to translate it, her hands moving quickly across her datapad. They knew they were leaving, she said, reading the translation. They knew their time in this galaxy was ending. So they built these archives as a gift for whoever came after them. She continued reading, and her expression changed to surprise. Listen to this. We designed our technology to be understood and maintained by anyone with basic mechanical knowledge. True advancement is not complexity, but accessibility. If you can understand simple machines, you can understand our legacy. We leave this knowledge freely, hoping it benefits all who find it. The room was silent. Everyone understood the significance. The precursors hadn't made their technology complicated to show off. They had made it simple so that anyone could use it and maintain it. They built it for us, Velthar said softly. For all of us. And we almost missed it, Kormath added. Because we assumed it had to be complicated. Thexanor made a sound that might have been a sigh. The human was right. Sometimes the simplest solution is correct. It seemed to physically pain him to admit it, but he said it anyway. Days passed. The Tower of Ascendancy became a hub of research and discovery. Ships arrived from across the galaxy, each wanting access to the archives. Diplomatic negotiations began about how to share the knowledge fairly. Deho received his payment, a substantial sum that would let him retire if he wanted. But there was also the matter of what this meant for his company. He met with Velthor in a quiet observation deck overlooking the celestial vault. "I've been thinking about the reward," Deho said. "You have earned every credit," Velthor replied. "I know, but I don't need all of it. What I really want is something else." Deho pulled out a proposal he had written. "Contracts for my company across multiple stations. Good contracts that pay fairly and treat humans as equals. Not just for me, but for Hana, Taeyang, and everyone else in our company." Velthor read the proposal. "You would trade personal wealth for your colleagues' benefit?" "They supported me." Hana found the critical information. "Taeyang brought me the paperclip, even if he didn't know it would matter. I couldn't have done this alone." "This is very human," Velthor said, and it sounded like a compliment. "I will make it happen." Before leaving the station, Deho visited the tower one last time. He stood in the elevator, looking at the control panel with its 50 buttons. All working perfectly now. He took out the paperclip, he had kept it, and placed it in a small display case he had brought. He sealed the case and set it on a shelf in his quarters. A reminder that sometimes the simplest tools solve the biggest problems. Taeyang found him packing. Captain Mireille is still waiting for an answer about that job offer. "I'm going to say no," Deho said. "Really? Why?" "Because I like fixing things. If I take that job, I'll spend all my time in meetings and managing people. I'd rather be the person who actually does the work." "Fair enough," Taeyang said. "So what now?" "Now we go back to work. I hear there's a station in the outer rim with a malfunctioning water recycler. They specifically requested us." "A water recycler? After you opened an ancient alien elevator?" Deho smiled. "It's still important. People need water. Besides, every problem deserves someone who'll try to solve it, no matter how big or small." They boarded their transport ship, heading back toward human space. As the ship pulled away from Viridian Archive, Deho looked back at the celestial vault one last time. He had opened doors that had been closed for centuries. He had proved that humans belonged among the stars. But most importantly, he had stayed true to who he was, a technician who fixed things one problem at a time. Behind him, the Tower of Ascendancy glowed with activity. Researchers from dozens of species worked together, sharing knowledge the precursors had left for all of them. It was the beginning of a new era of cooperation and understanding, and it had all started with a paperclip. Hana's face appeared on the ship's communication screen. "Hey, I heard you turned down the big fancy job." "News travels fast," Deho said. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You stayed yourself." "Thanks, Hana. So what's next?" "Vacation." "Water recycler on Station Kepler," Hana laughed. "From ancient alien elevators to water recyclers. That's quite a step down." "Maybe," Deho said, smiling. "But someone's got to fix it." The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying them toward the next job, the next problem, the next solution. Deho settled into his seat content. Fame and glory were fine for some people, but he preferred the satisfaction of a job well done. Somewhere in his bag, the bent paperclip rested safely in its case, a simple tool that had changed the galaxy, a reminder that sometimes the most Morning of the third day arrived with tension in the air. Everyone knew this was Deho's last chance. 24 hours remained, but really, if this attempt failed, there would be no time to try anything else. The chamber was more crowded than ever. Word had spread that the human had a plan. Representatives from various species lined the walls. Camera drones floated overhead, broadcasting to ships across the system. Deho stood before the council holding a simple paperclip in his hand. The silence was thick. "You cannot be serious," Thexnor said, finally breaking the quiet. "A paperclip. You propose to use a paperclip?" "Yes," Deho said calmly. "This is beyond insulting. This is mockery. The greatest engineering challenge of our generation, and you bring a piece of bent wire." Thexnor's clicking grew louder and more agitated. I demand this farce end now. Why? Ji-won asked, stepping forward to stand beside Dae-ho. Why is a simple solution insulting? Maybe that's exactly what we need. Because the precursors were advanced beings who built an elevator, Ji-won interrupted. A very good elevator, but still just an elevator. They didn't make it complicated on purpose. They made it work. Cormath approached Dae-ho, his crystalline body reflecting the chamber's lights. The massive engineer looked at the paperclip for a long moment. Explain your reasoning. Dae-ho held up the paperclip. It's thin enough to fit in the cavity. It's flexible enough to bend around the curves in the path. But it's also strong enough. Steel wire can handle significant force. If I can guide it to the stuck mechanism and hook it properly, I can pull it into position. Have you calculated the angles? Cormath asked. Taeyang and I worked on it all night, Dae-ho said. Taeyang stepped forward, displaying their calculations on a data pad. Based on your sonar maps, we know the exact path the paperclip needs to follow. Cormath studied the calculations. His body flashed through several colors. Dae-ho had learned this meant he was thinking deeply. The mathematics are sound, he said finally, but the margin for error is extremely small. I know, Dae-ho said. This is insane. Thexnor muttered. Perhaps, Velthar said, his calm voice cutting through the tension. But we authorize this attempt. We should let it proceed. He looked at Quinara. The floating administrator pulsed with bioluminescent light. I agree. Proceed with the attempt. The entire galaxy is watching, Thexnor warned. When this fails, and it will fail, humanity will be humiliated. Then I'll be humiliated, Dae-ho said. But I'm going to try anyway. Cormath cleared the area around the doors, leaving only Dae-ho, Taeyang, and a few essential personnel. The crowds pushed back but remained watching. Hundreds of aliens, all silent, all waiting. Dae-ho approached the left door. He had straightened the paperclip completely, creating a long, thin probe. At one end, he had carefully bent a small hook, designed to catch the stuck mechanism. Ready? Taeyang asked quietly. No, Dae-ho admitted. But let's do it anyway. He knelt beside the door, locating the tiny gap they had identified. It was barely visible, just a narrow opening between the door panel and the frame. He carefully inserted the paperclip's tip. The chamber was absolutely silent. Even Thexnor had stopped clicking. Dae-ho worked slowly, feeding the paperclip into the gap millimeter by millimeter. He could feel the wire bending as it encountered the curved path. His hands were steady, his breathing calm. This was what he did. He fixed things. 2 centimeters in, Taeyang said softly, watching a sensor that tracked the paperclip's progress. Curve coming up in 3 millimeters. Dae-ho adjusted his angle, letting the wire bend naturally around the curve. The paperclip was flexible, but it couldn't be forced. He had to work with it, feeling his way forward. Curve completed, Taeyang said. 4 centimeters in. Minutes passed. Dae-ho's world narrowed to just his hands and the paperclip. He could feel every tiny resistance, every small shift. The wire moved deeper into the cavity, following the path they had calculated. 7 centimeters, Taeyang whispered. You should be near the mechanism. Dae-ho felt a change in resistance. The paperclip had encountered something. He moved it gently left, then right, searching. There, something solid. The stuck mechanism. Contact, he said quietly. Around the chamber, aliens leaned forward. Camera drones moved closer. Now came the difficult part. Dae-ho needed to position the hook to catch the mechanism properly. Too shallow and it would slip off. Too deep and it might jam things worse. He moved the paperclip in tiny increments, feeling for the right position. His back ached from kneeling. Sweat dripped down his face. But he kept his hands steady. I think I have it, he said. You think? Thexnor called out. You think? Quiet, Velthar said firmly. Dae-ho took a slow breath. The hook felt secure. Now he needed to pull. Not too hard, he could snap the paperclip. Not too soft, the mechanism wouldn't move. Just right. He began to pull, applying steady, even pressure. Nothing happened. He pulled a bit harder. Still nothing. It's not working, someone in the crowd whispered. Dae-ho closed his eyes, focusing entirely on what he could feel through the wire. The mechanism was stuck, but not immovably stuck. It just needed the right angle, the right pressure. He adjusted his position slightly, changing the angle of pull by just a few degrees. Then he pulled again, steady and firm. He felt something shift. The sensation traveled up the paperclip like a tiny vibration. The mechanism had moved just a fraction of a centimeter. Again, Taeyang said, watching the sensors. It's moving. Daeho pulled once more, maintaining the same angle and pressure. Another shift. Another fraction of movement. Slowly, patiently, he worked the mechanism forward. Each pull moved it a little bit more. It was like opening a stuck drawer. You had to work it gently, coaxing it along. The minutes stretched out. Daeho lost track of time. There was only the paperclip, the mechanism, and the tiny movements forward. Almost there, Taeyang said, his voice tight with excitement. Just a bit more. One more pull. Daeho felt the resistance suddenly give way. The sound started deep in the structure like distant thunder. The entire chamber vibrated. The symbols on the doors flared brighter, cycling through colors that hadn't been seen in 200 years. Then, with a sound like a great sigh, the massive doors began to open. They moved slowly, majestically, revealing a gap that grew wider and wider. Soft blue light spilled out from inside. The light was warm and welcoming, not harsh like the station's artificial lights. The doors opened fully and stopped. Inside, the elevator was pristine. The walls were smooth and clean. The control panel glowed softly, showing 50 buttons, one for each level. Everything looked brand new, as if the elevator had been built yesterday, not 3,000 years ago. The chamber erupted. Aliens of every species began talking at once, some cheering, others arguing, many simply staring in disbelief. Daeho slowly stood up, his legs stiff from kneeling so long. He looked at the paperclip in his hand, now slightly bent from the effort. Such a simple tool, such an impossible result. Taeyang grabbed him in a hug. You did it! You actually did it. Velthar approached, his reptilian face showing what Daeho thought might be a smile. Remarkable. Truly remarkable. Even Cormath seemed impressed, his crystalline body flashing colors rapidly. I must admit I did not think it would work. But you succeeded. Jiwon was already moving into the elevator, examining the control panel. It's all functional. All 50 levels are accessible. This is going to change everything. Dexnor said nothing. The insectoid alien simply stared at the open doors, clicking softly to himself. Daeho looked at the elevator, then at the paperclip, then at all the assembled aliens. The next morning, Daeho arrived at the chamber early. Most of the aliens were still resting, but a few remained, monitoring their scanning equipment. The doors looked exactly the same as they had the day before, massive, sealed, and covered in glowing symbols. A human woman was sitting near the doors, studying a datapad. She looked up when Daeho approached. You must be the famous technician, she said in Korean, standing up. I'm Jiwon, xenoarchaeologist. I study dead civilizations. Nice to meet you, Daeho said. Have you been studying the precursors? For 5 years now, Jiwon replied. They're fascinating. They left structures all over the galaxy, but we know almost nothing about them. These doors are one of the few things we've found that still works, or would work if we could open them. What do you know about them? The precursors, I mean. Jiwon sat down and Daeho joined her. Not much. They disappeared about 3,000 years ago. No one knows why, but everything they built was incredibly advanced, also incredibly durable. Nothing they made ever breaks or wears out. Nothing breaks ever? Daeho asked. That doesn't seem possible. I know, right? But it's true. Every precursor artifact we've found still works perfectly. The lights in this chamber? Precursor technology. They've been glowing for 3,000 years without any power source we can detect. Jiwon gestured at the doors. That's why everyone assumes these doors are locked, not broken. Precursor technology doesn't break. Daeho stood and walked to the doors again. He studied them in the morning light filtering through the chamber's windows. Can I ask you something? When did these doors stop working? Jiwon checked her datapad. We're not sure exactly. The Celestial Vault was discovered about 200 years ago by a Clixon exploration ship. The doors were already sealed then, so they could have stopped working any time in the last 3,000 years? Theoretically, yes. Daeho knelt down near the base of the doors. He pulled out a small temperature scanner from his bag. Not advanced alien technology, just a simple device from Earth. He ran it along the doorframe, watching the readings. What are you doing? Asked Thexnor, who had entered the chamber. The insectoid alien looked at Daeho's scanner with clear disdain. That primitive device cannot possibly. The temperature is different here, Deho said, pointing to a spot on the frame. It's 0.3 degrees cooler than the rest of the area. Irrelevant, Thexnor said. Temperature variations are meaningless. Maybe, Deho said. He moved to another part of the door and scanned again. But the pattern is consistent. The entire door frame is slightly cooler than the surrounding structure. Cormath had arrived as well. The massive crystalline engineer approached, interested despite his earlier skepticism. That is curious. Our scans showed the temperature difference, but we assumed it was due to the door material's thermal properties. Could be, Deho agreed. Or it could mean something is still active inside. Something using energy, even just a little bit. Fascinating observation, Veltar said, joining the group. What else have you noticed? Deho walked along the entire length of both doors, examining every centimeter. He pulled out a small electromagnetic field detector, another simple Earth device. As he moved it near the doors, it beeped softly. There's an electromagnetic signature, he said. Faint, but it's there. We detected that as well, Cormath said, but we could not determine its source or purpose. And look here, Deho said, pointing to the edge of the left door. See these marks? Very small, almost invisible, but they're wear patterns. Jiwan leaned in close using a magnifier. You're right. I never noticed those before. Wear patterns mean movement, Deho said. These doors were used regularly at some point. They opened and closed many times, probably thousands of times. That supports my research, Jiwan said excitedly. The precursors weren't mysterious magical beings. They were just people, well, aliens who lived normal lives. They needed to move between floors, so they built an elevator. A really good elevator, but still just an elevator. Thexnor made an angry clicking sound. You oversimplify. Precursor technology operates on principles far beyond. Beyond what? Deho interrupted. Beyond normal engineering? I don't think so. Good engineering is good engineering, no matter who does it. And good engineering means making things that work reliably. The human makes a point, Cormath said thoughtfully. Perhaps we have been overthinking this. I need access to your historical records, Deho said. Specifically the records from when this station was first built around the vault. Why? Thexnor demanded. Because maybe someone wrote down what happened when they first found these doors. Maybe they were already closed, or maybe something happened during construction that jammed them. Velthar nodded to Cormath, who activated a communication device. I will have those records sent to you. Deho returned to the communication room and called Hana again. When her face appeared on the screen, she was eating noodles. Already calling for help? She teased. I need you to dig through some files, Deho said. The station is sending them over. They're old records from when Viridian Archive was built about 200 years ago. Look for anything about the elevator doors. On it, Hana said, setting down her food. What am I looking for specifically? Anything unusual? Any mentions of the doors, any construction incidents, anything that might explain why they're closed? This might take a while. These old records are usually a mess, and that's why I called you. You're the best at finding needles in haystacks. Hana grinned. Flattery will get you everywhere. I'll start now. While waiting, Deho returned to the chamber. More aliens had gathered, watching him work. He tried to ignore them and focus on the doors. He took measurements, made sketches, and documented everything he observed. Hours passed. Deho was examining the right door's upper corner when his communicator buzzed. It was Hana. Found something interesting, she said. In the construction logs from year 1 of the station build. There was an incident. A small cargo ship accidentally crashed into the vault's outer wall. It didn't do much damage, precursor structures are tough, but it caused some vibrations through the whole structure. When was this? Deho asked. About a week after they started construction. And get this. The chief engineer at the time noted that some of the precursor lights flickered during the impact. He thought it was strange because precursor technology never reacts to anything. What about the elevator doors? No direct mention, but the engineer wrote that several precursor mechanisms seemed to activate briefly after the impact, then went dormant again. Deho felt excitement building. That's it. That's when the doors jammed. The impact triggered some kind of safety mechanism. A safety mechanism? Hana asked. Think about it. You build an elevator in a massive tower. You want to make sure that if something goes wrong, like the building getting hit, the elevator doesn't open and send people falling to their deaths. So you install an emergency lock. That makes sense, Jiwan said. Deho hadn't noticed her standing nearby listening. The precursors would have thought about safety. So the doors aren't locked by design, Deho said, thinking out loud. They're locked because they think there's an emergency. The safety mechanism activated 200 years ago and never reset. Can you reset it? Felthar asked. Maybe, Deho said, if I can figure out how the mechanism works. He looked at the massive doors with new understanding. Somewhere behind that black Deho stared out the window of the transport shuttle as it approached Viridian Archive. The space station was massive, built around something even larger. At the center floated an enormous dark structure that looked like a black crystal tower. The locals called it the Celestial Vault. Nobody knew who built it, but everyone knew it was old. Very old. First time at Viridian? Asked the pilot, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. Yes, Deho replied, adjusting his maintenance uniform. I usually work on smaller stations, the pilot laughed. Well, you picked an interesting day to visit. Deho wondered what that meant, but the pilot said nothing more. The shuttle docked and Deho grabbed his small tool bag. He stepped onto the station and immediately felt overwhelmed. The corridor was huge, with aliens of dozens of species walking past. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few seemed to be made of pure energy. Deho had seen many alien species before, but never this many in one place. A tall reptilian alien approached him. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in green scales that shimmered under the station lights. It wore elegant robes that seemed to shift colors as it moved. Mr. Deho, the alien asked in perfect Korean. Yes, that's me, Deho said, surprised. I am Ambassador Velthar of the Sarith delegation. Thank you for coming on such short notice. The ambassador's voice was deep and calming. Please follow me. We have much to discuss. They walked through the station's corridors. Deho noticed that everyone seemed to be heading in the same direction. Groups of aliens stood talking in hushed voices, pointing toward the center of the station. May I ask what this is about? Deho said. The message just said you needed a maintenance technician. You will see shortly, Velthar replied. They entered a large chamber that opened directly to the Celestial Vault. Deho gasped. Up close, the structure was breathtaking. The walls were made of a black material that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing with a faint blue light. In the center of the chamber stood a pair of massive doors, at least 20 feet tall. A crowd of aliens surrounded them, some operating scanning equipment, others simply watching. What is this place? Deho asked. This, Velthar said, is the Tower of Ascendancy, an elevator system built by the precursors over 3,000 years ago. It connects 50 levels of archives filled with their knowledge. And those doors have been jammed shut for centuries. Deho walked closer, studying the doors. They were beautiful, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. An insectoid alien skittered toward them. It had multiple legs and arms with large compound eyes that reflected rainbow colors. Ambassador Velthar, surely you jest. You brought a human? A human to solve what our greatest minds could not? High Curator Thexnor, Velthar said calmly. May I introduce Deho, a maintenance specialist from Earth? Thexnor made a clicking sound that Deho assumed was laughter. This is insulting. We have tried everything. Plasma cutters melted before touching the doors. Quantum disruptors created temporal anomalies. Nanite swarms disintegrated on contact. And you think a primitive human with simple tools can succeed? I think, Velthar said, that perhaps we have been thinking about this problem in the wrong way. Another alien approached, this one massive and crystalline, its body made of living geometric shapes that glowed from within. I am Chief Engineer Cormath. Welcome to Viridian Archive. The voice sounded like wind chimes. Ambassador Velthar requested you specifically. He believes humans have a unique approach to problem solving. I fix things, Deho said simply. That's what I do. These doors are not simply broken, Thexnor said. They are protected by technology beyond your comprehension. Precursor engineering operates on principles that... Let him examine it, Velthar interrupted gently. We have nothing to lose, Cormath nodded. You have 72 hours. If you succeed, you will be rewarded generously. If you fail, the engineer paused. Well, many are watching. This will affect how other species view humanity's capabilities. Deho felt a knot form in his stomach. He was just a maintenance worker. He fixed air recyclers and water pumps, not ancient alien elevators. But he had come all this way, and backing out now would look worse than trying and failing. "I'll need to examine the doors closely," he said. "Of course," Cormath replied. "We will clear the area." The crowd moved back, though many remained to watch. Deho set down his tool bag and approached the doors. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, some curious, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. He reached out and touched the door's surface. It was cool and perfectly smooth. He ran his fingers along the edge where the two doors met. Then he pressed his ear against the metal and knocked gently, listening. Behind him, Thexnor clicked in what sounded like disgust. "Primitive methods. Absolutely primitive." Deho ignored the comment and continued his examination. He pulled out a small flashlight and shined it along the doorframe, looking at every detail. Then he simply stood back and looked at the whole thing, taking in the pattern of the symbols and the way the doors were positioned. After 30 minutes of this, he stepped away. "I need to make a call," he said. Cormath led him to a private communication room. Deho activated his personal communicator, and after a moment Hana's face appeared on the screen. She was sitting in their office back on Earth, surrounded by displays and data screens. "Deho, how's the special assignment?" she asked cheerfully. "Complicated," he said. He explained the situation, the ancient doors, the failed attempts, the skeptical aliens, and the 72-hour deadline. Hana was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "Sounds impossible. So basically a regular Tuesday for you." "Hana, I'm serious. What if I can't do this?" "Then you can't," she said with a shrug. "But since when do you give up before trying? Remember the station reactor on Titan? Everyone said it couldn't be fixed without replacing the entire core. You fixed it with a wrench and some wire. This is different." "Maybe. But I know you, Deho. You see things other people miss. That's why they called you, right?" She leaned forward. "So stop worrying about what the bug-eyed aliens think and just do what you do best. Look at the problem like it's just another broken machine." Deho smiled. "Thanks, Hana. Anytime. Call me if you need research or data. I'll dig up whatever you need." After ending the call, Deho returned to the chamber. The crowd had grown larger. Word was spreading through the station that a human was attempting the impossible. Velthar approached him. "What do you think?" "I think," Deho said slowly, "that everyone has been trying to force these doors open. But maybe that's not how they work. Maybe we need to understand what's keeping them closed first." "An interesting perspective," Velthar said. Deho looked up at the massive doors. Somewhere in there was a mechanism, a system, a reason why they wouldn't open. And he had... By the second day, word had spread across the entire station. The human technician who thought he could open the ancient doors had a theory. Crowds gathered in the chamber watching Deho work. Some believed in him. Most did not. 48 hours remaining, Cormath announced as Deho arrived that morning. Deho nodded. He felt the pressure, but he tried not to think about it. He had a theory now. He just needed to prove it. Another human arrived that morning carrying a large equipment case. He was young with bright eyes and a friendly smile. "Deho," the man called out, waving. "They told me you might need backup. Taeyang?" Deho was surprised to see his colleague. "What are you doing here?" "Company sent me. Figured you might need an extra pair of hands." Taeyang set down his case. "Also brought some things from home. Real food, not that recycled station stuff. And your personal toolkit. You left it in the workshop." Deho smiled. It felt good to have a familiar face around. "Thanks. I wasn't expecting backup. Are you kidding? You're trying to open doors that have been sealed for centuries. That's impressive even for you." Taeyang looked around at the gathered aliens. Lots of people watching. "Too many," Deho said. Velthar approached them. "Mr. Taeyang, welcome. I hope you can assist your colleague. Time grows short and the council is growing impatient." "Council?" Deho asked. "Representatives from 17 different species," Velthar explained. "All want access to the archives. All are watching to see if you succeed. The political implications of this are significant." "No pressure, then," Taeyang muttered. Cormath called a meeting of all the senior engineers and scientists. Deho stood before them in a small conference room with Taeyang beside him for support. The room was filled with aliens of various species, all looking at him with different expressions. Some curious, others skeptical, and Thexnor looked openly hostile. "Please explain your theory," Cormath said. Deho took a deep breath. Everyone has been treating these doors like they're locked with some complex digital security system. But I don't think they are. I think they're jammed because of a mechanical safety mechanism. Mechanical? Thexnor clicked. The precursors were capable of manipulating quantum fields and creating perpetual energy. You think they would use crude mechanical locks? Yes, Deho said simply. Because mechanical systems are reliable. They don't need power. They don't glitch. They work the same way every time. This is absurd, Thexnor said, turning to the others. The precursors operated on principles beyond our understanding, certainly beyond human understanding. To suggest they would use primitive— Maybe that's the problem, Jiwan interrupted. Maybe we've been assuming the precursors were so advanced that we can't understand them. But what if they were just practical? What if they built things to last? Things that worked simply and reliably? I agree with the human, said a floating jellyfish-like alien. Deho learned her name was Subdirector Quinara. She managed the station's operations. We have been attempting to solve this puzzle for decades. Perhaps it is time to try a different approach. Thank you, Subdirector, Velthar said. Please continue, Deho. Deho pulled up his notes on a display screen. Based on my examination and the historical records, I believe the doors have a physical safety interlock. When the cargo ship hit the station 200 years ago, it triggered this safety mechanism. The mechanism locked the doors to prevent anyone from opening them during what it thought was an emergency. If that is true, Cormath said slowly, then the doors are not locked. They are simply stuck. Exactly, Deho said. Stuck in the locked position. How do we unstick them? Quinara asked. First, we need to see what we're working with. Deho brought up an image on the screen. With Cormath's help, we've been mapping the mechanism behind the door panels using sonar scanning. Look here. The image showed a complex network of mechanical parts behind the left door. Deep inside was a small cavity with what looked like an arm or lever. This arm should extend to release the doors, Deho explained. But it's stuck here about 2 centimeters from its release position. If we can push it forward, the doors should open. What prevents us from reaching it? Velthar asked. The cavity is too narrow, and the path curves. We need something thin enough to fit through the gap, flexible enough to bend around the curves, but strong enough to push the mechanism. Our microprobes are too rigid, Cormath said, and our nanites disintegrate on contact with the precursor metal. I know, Deho said. He didn't have a solution yet, but he was working on it. Thexnor stood up. This is a waste of time. Even if your theory is correct, which I doubt, you have no way to reach the mechanism. We should admit defeat and move on. We have 24 hours remaining, Velthar said firmly. We will use that time. The meeting ended. Deho and Taeyang returned to the chamber. They spent hours examining the doors, testing different tools, trying to find something that would work. Nothing did. Every probe was too thick, too rigid, or too weak. As evening came, Deho felt frustration building. His theory was sound. He was sure of it. But having the right theory didn't matter if he couldn't execute it. Let's take a break, Taeyang suggested. You need to eat something. They sat in a quiet corner of the chamber, eating the food Taeyang had brought from Earth. Real rice, real vegetables. It tasted like home. You'll figure it out, Taeyang said. You always do. Maybe not this time, Deho said quietly. His communicator buzzed. It was Hana making her regular check-in call. Her face appeared on the small screen. How's it going? She asked. Not great, Deho admitted. He explained the problem. They knew what was wrong but couldn't reach the mechanism to fix it. That's frustrating, Hana said. Sounds like you need something really thin and flexible. Like a wire or something. Tried wires, too weak. They bend but can't push the mechanism. Hana thought for a moment. What about— She was interrupted by someone in her office calling her name. Hold on, she said, turning away from the screen. While waiting, Deho absently reached for some papers Taeyang had brought. They were old maintenance reports held together with a bent paperclip. Deho unclipped them and started straightening the paperclip without thinking. Just something to do with his hands. Sorry about that, Hana said, turning back to the screen. She noticed what he was doing and laughed. What are you doing? Planning to fix an ancient alien elevator with a paperclip? Deho stopped. He looked at the paperclip in his hand. It was just a simple piece of steel wire bent into a useful shape, thin, flexible, but also strong enough to hold papers together. Deho? Hana said, noticing his expression.
What's wrong?
Hana, Deho said slowly. I think you just solved it. What?
I was joking, I know.
But you're right. He held up the paperclip. This is exactly what I need. Taeyang looked at the paperclip, then at Deho, then back at the paperclip.
You're serious. Completely serious, Deho said.
He was already calculating in his head. The wire was thin enough. It was flexible enough to navigate the curves, and steel was strong enough to push the mechanism. A paperclip, Taeyang said, starting to smile. You're going to open a 3,000-year-old alien elevator with a paperclip. If it works, Deho said. This is either brilliant or crazy. Maybe both, Deho said. But for the first time